Hello and welcome to another episode of the Single Girl's Guide to Life, your weekly guide to single life living in your 20s, 30s and 40s. I'm Chantelle, a single life empowerment coach, helping single women to realise that being single doesn't devalue them in any way and that a relationship doesn't make you worth any more. And through this podcast, I share the different ways that you can start to embrace your single life. Whether that is trying a little bit of dating out, but also making sure that you enjoy living and being alone, whether you go on solo trips and adventures and you start pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. And you don't even have to be a single woman for this to be relevant. I know that so many more of you that don't necessarily fit directly into that box, because sometimes we talk about loneliness, which affects so many people. And sometimes the things I talk about for single women apply to all genders. So you don't have to be a single woman to be enjoying this, but that is who I'm thinking about specifically, because that's who I am. I have been single for 3 years now, and I have lived on my own, in my own space, for just over a year and a half now. And I am truly enjoying the experience following my divorce. There's a lot of change that goes on with any type of breakup, whether you have got to do the legal part and go through a divorce, or whether you can just make that split and you don't have quite so many formalities to go through. But there is a place within my life where I enjoy being on my own. So be it. If a relationship comes along and that opportunity's there, like I'm not completely off of dating apps, though question mark them quite a lot of the time. It's this idea of being happy with your own company, but finding the right balance of spending time with other people as well. For me, I do love being on my own. I don't sit there and think I'm not spending enough time with people, nor do I think that I need more time on my own. I think I've found the right balance for me, which will look slightly different for all of us. But today's episode is going to specifically go into the pros and cons of living on your own. It can be seen that if you choose to live on your own, that you're going to get this sense of independence that you will never be able to give up if you continue that way and get used to it. Hey, if you like that way and you find that it's for you, then so be that. Enjoy that and know that just because society and lots of people within society choose to live together for building a family life, for financial reasons, doesn't mean that you have to. If you have got the opportunity to do it and it works for you, then brilliant. Now, some of you don't like the idea of being on your own, and it's actually a little bit scary, the thought of moving out of family home or moving out of sort of university or living with housemates, to the prospect of moving into a space where you are going to be on your own and that's the only person that's there as a consistency. Other people might make us also feel like we should be worried that we're going to be lonely. Now, we know from the Mental Health Foundation's research paper on all the lonely people that being single and living on your own as two separate groups can put you at a higher risk factor of being subject to loneliness. But that doesn't mean that because you're single and or living on your own, that you will be lonelier. It depends on the environment around you specifically. That's probably why you're at higher risk, because potentially, naturally, you may have a more isolated life, as I previously mentioned on another podcast. But that doesn't mean that that's true, and it doesn't mean that you would be unhappy with that either way. But it is important to understand whether you are already living alone, appreciating what it is that is wonderful about living on your own, because sometimes we can get caught up in the cons of living your own, because no side to this is perfect, which you'll hear based on the pros and cons that I go through in a little bit. But in actual fact, if we ever find that frustration, which will naturally creep in, you'll be able to look there and go, but hang on, I do get all of this. But also, how do I address these cons? What can I do about that to be able to really move past feeling annoyed or begrudged at living on your own? In the alternative, for those that are thinking about that idea or the prospect is coming up and some people are a little bit scared about it because they're hearing things from other people and they're worried, well, here you can hear about what the reality is like a little bit and where those things can catch you out and what to do about it. But also the things to celebrate, and why living on your own can be an opportunity. It can be exciting, and it can allow you to develop in other ways. There are lots of practicalities that come with moving out into your own space, whether that's with somebody else or not. If you do it with somebody else, obviously you naturally have that person to lean on, and maybe they know a little bit more than you, but maybe they don't. It's one of those things that you can't necessarily learn about until you start doing. Okay, read up on things, check out different blogs and information websites about moving out to live on your own, checklists to make sure that you've changed all your addresses. It amazes me sometimes when I share about the 25% single living person's discount. Most councils have this. I don't know if it's a requirement that they have to, but most councils I've found do have it, where if you live on your own and you're the only person registered on the council tax for that, then you are entitled to 25% off of your council tax. We won't go into today why it isn't 50% and the discussion about why it should or shouldn't be 50% or 25%, but you are entitled to that. So even if you've just listened for these first 5 to 6 minutes and you've got out the fact that you're entitled to a 25% discount because you live on your own and you didn't know it before, then fab. Many people do come across this anyway when they're sorting out their council tax, but there seems to be people that are missed off, and you could be owed a little bit of money there. So check it out just in case. And as I say, you can't learn these things until you start doing them. It's really important to understand that. So we're also going to give a little bit back in terms of preparing some of you for living on your own, but also reminding those of you that already do to embrace it and to love it. So I am going to start with the positives. I'm not going to beat around the bush. Let's get on with the stuff that we know is great. So the first thing we have for living on your own that is a pro is one of the simplest things that can be the biggest wind-ups when you live in a house with other people. And that is that things are exactly where you left them. There is no doubt about where it could possibly be, although you do start to question your own mind at sometimes because you think you put it somewhere different to where you did. But if there is literally nobody else in the house, chances are the majority of things are left exactly where you left them the last time that you put them there. And the frustration when you live with anybody else is that things move, particularly in family households where parents and other family members are trying to keep the space clean and you deem something tidy, but they deem tidy to look like something else, and they move something, even if it is in your bedroom sometimes, like where they're dusting, if they're looking after that space for you, even just a slight movement of things can become a frustration. But when you live on your own, all the stuff that you put down on the table, anything that you put away in a particular drawer is still in that place. And of course, we have those memory blips that I just referenced, which is when you move something without thinking about it and then you think that you left it there. But the thing is, you have that certainty that only you could have moved it. Only you could have done something with that. Unless you've given somebody a key and they do come round semi-often. That is a boundary that I have set with people that do have the keys to my home, is that I know when they come into my house. Slightly different if I've been away on holiday and they want to put stuff in the fridge as a treat. Different. But you also have to set boundaries, which is a whole other conversation around how you expect people to treat your house and having a key if you're going to give them a key. I think the sanity of being like, that is there and I know it's there, is a wonderful thing about living on your own, rather than things just disappearing and being put away, never to be seen again. The other one, if you can't already tell, for those watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see this quite strongly. You get to design the space however you want. I say about this for the people watching because I sit in front of a bright yellow wall that many of you will have seen on social media, whether it's Instagram stories or TikTok, and there is a lot of colourful decoration in front of that, as well as pictures. Some of them have made it into the frames and some of them haven't yet. There is lots of colour. Now, I probably now won't lose that love for colour. So if I do come into a situation where I end up with living with someone, the chances are that I will still want some level of colourful expression in some of the rooms. And it depends on that person. That person might be just as colourful or might like the style of the colour. It might be not something that they're used to, but it's something there. And when you're with someone, you do have to compromise on that. My experience with my ex wasn't bad. We had good taste in what we were doing and there were colours pulled in I've clearly gone brighter and more colourful here because it just wasn't something that we necessarily really leaned into. But we had pastel colours in the kitchen. We had orange and grey as our living room theme. Blue was the spare room. Pink was my dressing room. The only one that we actually discussed the most was the bedroom because we were trying to make it calming, yet didn't want it to be boring either. And we had plans to make it even more exciting at times too. We had colourful dining chairs for outside. We actually underused those, but it wasn't completely drawn out of me. However, this is a big part of me now, and I know that I'd probably lean into more colour because when you have been on your own and experimented in this way and you're like, oh, I like things looking like this, I like things being bright, I like having positive messages. Don't know if you've ever tried it, but having inspirational quotes, whilst mine aren't your traditional inspirational quotes, they come from Emily Coxhead's The Happy Newspaper quite often, whether it's the calendar version that I've adapted or it is the newspapers that I've adapted. I like having positive messages around because it keeps my environment positive. And therefore, if I'm spending time on my own here, then I want things to feel bright. And your environment matters because it's the place that you come back to. This is your home. It's interesting, the shift from calling this home to leaving the family home and not calling that necessarily home anymore. Like, I'm going home isn't to where it used to be. It does feel weird when you're first going through that transition to do. But the more you put your mark on it, the more I think it reflects you. And you don't have to express yourself through colour. I've seen so many different people's houses where they've had one colour that they loved and nearly all their house has reference to that, because quite often it's not big houses that single people are living in. You're living in one, maybe 2-bed places because that's what we can afford and it's all we really need. But people start to experiment a little bit. And you've also got people that don't really mind what it looks like. But you have the opportunity to design it the way that you want. And it also makes you grow up very quickly, not just from a DIY of design and decorative perspective, but the things such as when I had a vague leak in the pipes under the sink a while back now. The washing machine broke after just under a year of having it. Thanks for that warranty. But it's all of this responsibility comes in and you learn to kind of step it up and be the responsible person. There isn't really anyone else you're going to rely on, although some of you might instantly call one of your parents because you want to know, what do I do? Help me. You have to learn from somewhere. I am a YouTuber / a Googler, so I will Google what I need to do or look things up to try it in the first instance. You all find your different ways of doing it, but until you're in that situation, you don't necessarily know what you'd do. Some of you might have your uni experience to go by on that, but even then you might have left it to some of the other people to sort out the council tax and all the bills, and you just put the money in their account every week. And if things did go wrong, you just call mum and dad. Whereas in this instance, you might even try something different because you can't just pay someone to put it into the account. You've got to sort that out yourself and register to vote. I got my reminder to do that. I thought when you registered with the council that it did that, but apparently it doesn't. I had to do it separately. So I've updated that detail there. Lucky we haven't had anything voting-wise going on recently. And then thirdly, this can be the bit that feels the scariest when you consider the idea of living on your own. But this is the opportunity to practice solitude. And this is where the difference between being alone and loneliness comes in. Being able to be comfortable with yourself for some period of time, and not necessarily always, is valuable and important. It's this idea that if you stripped everything back and there was nobody else around, who are you and who would you be? And living on your own, where you generally naturally get more time on your own, can be the time for this opportunity to explore and to consider who it is you really are and what it is you would do with your time if nobody else was around. Because when we're out of a relationship, we aren't coming home to someone being there. You are generally coming home to no one, maybe a pet at best, and there will be some time on your own. I clearly love personal development, psychology, working on myself. My TV rarely goes on. It's there and it's off at the power, not just because of the cost of living crisis, but because it goes on so infrequently that it really is a waste for me to keep it on standby. But the bookshelf, on the other hand, and sitting here journaling, sometimes that's more in the bedroom because of the routines I've built up, allows me to keep myself in check with what I'm doing, how I'm feeling, and where I'm going with things. And it might feel like sometimes you have to take a step back before you can fully take a few steps forwards with that, because things start to unearth when you have this time on your own. You are with your thoughts more. And it would be easy to distract yourself from that. But if there's anything to be explored, which doesn't have to be a bad thing, by the way, then it will start to possibly come up where you've got more headspace, where you haven't got other people interrupting you or suggesting that you have dinner together and chat. That can be a great thing to do, by the way. Having conversations over dinner is a lovely part of human social interaction. But when you're on your own and you're having meals alone, actually the time before and after that, when you're not then cooking or eating or scrolling social media, can be the time to lean into yourself. And it takes some getting used to, and that's okay. Some of us find it very easy to get used to, and others of us take our time. Some of us still don't mind some time on our own, but still feel lonely. And that's what I work with people on the 5-day loneliness challenge, to address the parts that, come up for people. But in this instance, it allowed me to really step into myself fully by having that time on my own and to have nothing else determining my evenings, for example. Nothing else would interrupt. I didn't have to work around other people in the kitchen. I didn't have to worry about what noise there was in the house. The conditions that I built around me were built by me, chosen by me, and I made them happen when they did or not. I see that as an absolute advantage and privilege to be able to do. Because if you are someone that has to stay at home for financial reasons or any other reason, it can feel like you just want to get away and be on your own for a bit. I will never fully look at this situation and go, I wish it was different that badly. Do I wish to share my house with someone? Maybe one day. I don't know. If you ask me tomorrow, you're either going to live alone forever or you're going to have to live with someone forever, I'd be like, live alone. As long as you can do all the things, to socialise, you're not going to take that away from me right now. My heart is in staying alone, in a living space. I don't mind having a relationship. I'm just not going to live with someone very quickly. I did all of that before, and I've only lived on my own for 1.5 years. I want a little bit more of that. And you're allowed to say that, by the way, just like I just did right there. You can define your relationships as you start to go in them. Look, I want a relationship and I want to get to know you and I want to get to have experience with you quite a lot. But for me, I'm not going to be looking to move in with someone very, very quickly at all. I'd want us to take this at a really nice pace and I want to really get to know you. And you can come stay and I can come stay at yours, but this is my house for the time being and this is the way I'm living it. Because you're allowed to maintain your sense of identity even when you're in a relationship. And it's important to know who you are through things like this before you get yourself into one. So those are the summary to me of the pros. Maybe I've missed some. Feel free to drop me a message on Instagram if you're having thoughts that I've missed something in particular, because I always like to hear that. Or you can join our online community where we can discuss these kind of things ongoing. The online community that we have is one of the things that helps to keep this going. This all costs money to have. I edit it myself, so it's all the time that goes into it. But the people that are within the group essentially keep this podcast going. And as a way to give back to them, it is the community within the group where there are weekly posts about the podcast, but not just the podcast. There are wider questions that go out about what is it that you really expect from dating that you're not getting? What is your biggest challenge when you live on your own, etc. There is all these little things that come up and we share the frustrations and then we celebrate the pros. Just this week, somebody posted that they'd gone on their first solo, was it date or dinner date? I can see the picture. They went to London somewhere. I can't remember exactly what they did, but it's that encouragement and sharing that we do together. So if you want to keep supporting this podcast, then you can head to the link that I'll put in the description to keep on supporting the fact that this can get made and be hopefully as useful and helpful as it has been so far. And now we'll head on to the cons, because no situation is perfect. And it is useful to be aware of some of those things so that you can think about them if this is something you're considering, or to just know that chances are if I'm bringing it up, either I've gone through it, so there's at least one other person that's gone through it, or it's come from the community and the conversations I've had with coaching clients that tell me that this is how they find living alone and the frustrations around it. So they almost respond to the pros that I brought up. So the first pro was things are exactly where you left them. And the con is things are exactly where you left them. Because if you leave the dishes by the sink will stay there. No one is moving those without you. Over there on the chair, there is a pile of laundry. It's been there for a few days. Some of it has gone downstairs into the bedroom because my house is upside down. There is now also more laundry that's just gone on top whilst I put a new wash in, though that's on pause whilst I'm recording this. And that pile will continue to stay there unless I keep taking it downstairs and putting it away. You are responsible for everything in this house, including putting things away, including keeping it not only tidy but also clean, and you're responsible for sorting out any of the things that do go wrong. It's not impossible to get used to that, but sometimes it can feel like a lot for one person when in a 2-person or more scenario, or just living with your parents, you have less onus on you to deal with it all / at all, depending on your previous situation that you're working in there. It's not something to put you off, it's just an awareness that some of your schedule during the week has to be allocated to keeping things tidy, or you have to get really good at habit development, which I'm clearly not quite because I've left the pile there, being able to put it away once it comes straight out of the washing machine, for example. My habit situation, there's probably a reason it got left there rather than going straight downstairs, possibly due to all of the travelling and moving about that I'm doing, just couldn't cope with more whilst I was trying to unpack, let alone put all that away. But my other habit to work around that is to take bits down. Every time I go downstairs, take a couple of items and kind of chip away at it. Some people don't like that because it just never feels like it gets it done. To me, it gets it done over time, and that's better for me. You find the ways that work for you. The con for number 2 is you've got to pay for it all. And this was me thinking about when you do the DIY, want to design it how you want it to be. And it goes beyond just DIY and design, but you have to pay for everything when you live on your own. And there is some level of a premium for that, naturally, because 2 people used to live in this house when I bought it off them, for example. So straight away, other than the council tax and some of the usage bills, I'm paying the same or a very similar amount, probably mortgage-wise, regardless of the fact that the house was probably more when I bought it than they did. But you know what I mean? It's that idea that I'm not splitting the mortgage with someone, whereas if I was with somebody else, I would be splitting the mortgage payment. We would be splitting the council tax, which, whilst it would be 100%, would still be cheaper because I'm currently paying 75%, whereas it would be 50-50 if there were 2 of us. So you are paying for all of it yourself. Yes, you own all of it, and it's not anybody else's. No one can question that, apart from the fact the bank technically own your house if you've got a mortgage. The onus is on you to pay for everything. So that's a little bit, can feel daunting. But generally, if you've gone through being mortgage checked or even used a mortgage advisor, they will have done the affordability calculations with you. And there are ways that you can protect yourself. So knowing what your sick pay terms and conditions are at work, and if they aren't all that strong, then potentially looking at income protection so that if something dreadful happened to you, you would be covered and you wouldn't have to worry about your home. Something to think about as an additional coverage. If you can, those are premium things. Those are things that aren't necessary, though some people would deem they might be. And it's down to you and how much money you've got and the balance between having some money for a social aspect versus everything going on the house and being able to pay for that and being savings. It just depends on how much of a saver you are. I naturally have always saved money and I'm quite used to that process. It might be the first time that you're used to having it all coming in and it going out quite quickly soon after. You have to get used to the things around money and being the only one, but build up a little pot within the first 6 months to a year if you can, and then you've got it. We're all going to have to be bracing ourselves with the oncoming cost of living crisis if things don't change, and you'll find that so many people are in the same boat. But even if you want to paint the wall or have someone come in to do your new carpets. You are paying for it all yourself. So there is a little bit of a con there, and not just on the bills part of things. Now, the next one is in response to having no social expectation. This comes down to the isolation bit and the idea of solitude. Yes, you may come home to no one and have the opportunity to socialise by choice if you are single, but sometimes people aren't around when you're single, and actually it isn't a choice at times. And it's weird because if you're in a relationship, it is almost a default that someone is there to speak to. And it is a default probably that you'll have an interaction with them. So whilst the isolation and the solitude can be a growth opportunity for you, and there is the choice around socialising, the other side is that we don't necessarily have that dependable singular person to come home to. Now, there are ways to deal with that, and it's one I talk about all the time, which is that you don't need one person to rely on all the time. Actually, a network of a number of friends can be just as effective, and you don't have to have them live with you either. But you can make it a point to regularly talk to them every couple of days so you know what's going on in their lives, and that you have this thing where you do drop them a call. God forbid you speak to someone live on the phone in person. Not in person, but you know what I mean. And sharing what's going on. And something like that literally takes 20 minutes if it's a bit of a catch up, just seeing how things are going, versus a long drawn out texting experience, which probably is only a summary at best because you don't get some of the detail because people keep it simple on text message. But because you're coming home to potentially nobody, we do have to be aware of that risk factor I mentioned earlier. Loneliness isn't going to occur necessarily if you keep well connected to yourself and you're happy with the balance of things going on, and you keep well connected to other people. If you start to feel that loneliness coming in, then it's time to do something about it. It's not a problem to feel lonely. It's an experience lots of people go through at different times in their life, whether they live with people or not. But sometimes that isolation can exaggerate it, make it feel bigger, and that feels real to you, and it is real. But it is your sign to do something about it. So whilst the risk may be higher in some way, it doesn't have to mean that it leads to loneliness. Make sure that you put in occasions to go and see your friends. Join a club, whether it's an online group or an active group, a hobby group, something a couple of times a week, volunteering, something that gets you out of the house, that breaks up the routine of coming home every single night and doing the same thing, so that you see other people that aren't just your work colleagues. Work can be great and it can fulfill it for some people. Otherwise, other forms of volunteering, contributing to society, being part of a group can be the answer to that. So, okay, you don't have the default person to come home to that's always there. I can tell you now, some of the people that are in relationships or have people that they come home to are sick of it. And they just know what the expectation is every day. And sometimes it can feel very boring, and that they still need to go out and go to hobbies and find new groups to belong to because they just need a different kind of evening rather than the same one all the time. Just because you're single and living alone doesn't mean it's an exclusive feeling to you. But it is the perspective I share because it's one I'm literally living right now. And I know so many of you are living. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing at all. Yes, there are cons, but cons that we can address and make sure that we do something about, whilst embracing the pros and remembering them. Let's not get those cons let us down. The grass will always be greener whichever situation you are in. It's about being able to accept what is happening right now, and the things that are within your control you can do something about, like adding extra social time in, like putting time in for journaling and making the most of that opportunity of being on your own. I hope that's been useful to you. Please give the podcast a rating because it helps even more people to find it. And if you want to join the online community and keep supporting the podcast and all the things that I do within the Single Girls Club events and coaching, then you will be able to join the community and get out of that just as much, whilst pushing forwards and helping other single women to celebrate their single lives. Until next time, everybody, keep celebrating single life together.